You're watching the Small Business Showcase, brought to you by Sasfin Suits and Sneakers. Mark Sassoon, welcome to the Small Business Showcase.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Mark. It's good to be here.
So it's really great to have you here. It's great to be finally doing this, and I always like to keep with the tradition, which is for the people who don't know who you are, who the hell is Mark Sassoon, and what is the value that you add to the world?
So I'm a husband and a father to 4 children under the age of 12, which keeps me busy. And in my spare time, I run a bank, and that has been a great journey. I've been with Sasfin for the last decade, and I've taken different roles within the organization, and very committed to our purpose, which is to enable businesses and clients to grow their wealth in their businesses. We've got these 2 parts to our business, and very excited about the opportunities that are in front of us.
So we thought we'd have you in today because, as everyone is beginning to understand, we've launched this 2nd season of the Small Business Showcase, and Sasfin has jumped on board, and we had quite a bit of negotiation before, or discussion, should I say, before, and both entities have really jumped into this. And I thought it would be great to have kind of the person who's at the very top come in and share a little bit about the who, what, where of Sasfin. But before we dive into that, what is it like running a bank?
It's very interesting. It's multifaceted. I think banking in many ways is at the center of economic activity, because people who've got money and they're not quite sure what to do with it, they approach a bank. People who need money, they've got great ideas, but they're not quite sure how to get the money, they approach a bank. So a bank traditionally, and maybe that will change as the world evolves in terms of fintech and payments, but for as long as anyone can remember, a bank's been at the center of the economy. And that's really quite a great place to be, because you're always meeting interesting people, interesting ideas, interesting businesses. Today we can be talking about a solar opportunity. Tomorrow we can be talking about a business that's manufacturing paint or building a great new technology. So you kind of get the full spectrum of the economy. But at the same time, banking is highly governed, it's highly regulated. So as the person running the bank, you spend quite a bit of time involved in ensuring that you are that custodian of people's trust, because obviously the main thing that a bank enables you to do is to take deposits from the public. And if you want to make sure that you are well placed to do that, and running a bank in this moment in South Africa's maturity, after the last decade we've been through and the last 18 months we've been through with COVID, has got its own interesting implications.
Yes, and in fact, you stole the very next question out of my mouth, so let's go there. If we take a look at where South Africa is at the moment, and with the pandemic in play, what would you say, how would you describe the state of banking in South Africa in general? Are we in a good place? Was it brutal on you from a COVID perspective? How did you guys get through this? What is the state of play for you as Sasfin and the banking industry in general?
Yeah, so obviously, most banks, a key revenue source for them is through lending, and therefore us as well. We lend to businesses, and unfortunately, we all know that COVID impacted many businesses, many good businesses, many wonderful entrepreneurs who you would back any day of the week, and their business model came under pressure because their income just dried up for very long. And unfortunately, that still is true for a number of businesses. And that puts pressure on a bank, because a bank therefore provides, in terms of potential credit losses, based on the performance of their clients at a point in time. But I think what's happened is that the banking industry in general has taken a lot of that provisioning early, and therefore my sense is that the banks will recover quite quickly as the economy returns to normal. Because also what happens is that you take a lot of pain on the clients that are facing pain, but I think most businesses that sustained themselves through the heart of COVID are looking good today. There will be some second degree impacts or effects in terms of how the consumer is impacted. And you kind of want to build for that and cater for that in terms of your provisioning. But and then against all of that is how the world is changing. In terms of move to digital technologies, move to payments, move to remote working or working in different spaces. And that, I think, creates lots of opportunity, creates some risk as well. But with all these elements, the risk creates an opportunity as well.
For sure. So, we've spoken a little bit off there, but really how the Small Business Showcase came to be originally was because we got so damaged by COVID through no fault of our own. And when we adjusted and kind of created this makeshift studio at first, we started thinking, well, how can we then shine a spotlight on other small businesses who, exactly as you said, like through no fault of their own, just got hit. And I really do feel bad for some entities and some industries where you just can't compete in it. Like, if you're a nightclub right now, you're a Decimate or whatever it is. There's tourism is in real, but it's amazing to see how people do seem to shift based on when they have to and what they'll come out with. So I would love to delve a little bit into Sasfin specifically. Banks are a fascinating industry from the other side as the consumer. And there are days where, as the consumer, I want to pull my hair out with banks. And then in going in this with suits and sneakers, I made it a deal with myself originally. That was, I would just not partner with big entities where the value systems are misaligned. But, as I got talking more and more to your team at Sasfin and we started finding more and more alignment, this thing popped up. So I would love to know from you, the horse's mouth, so to speak, cut the marketing spiel. Like, what is the unique selling proposition to the market from a Sasfin perspective? Why should people go to you as opposed to your competitors?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I'm second or third generation into this business. So my father ran the business before me. And I think many of the frustrations which you kind of articulate are frustrations that our family felt, because it wasn't a banking family. It was a textile trading family for a long time. And in that frustration, we understood kind of what an entrepreneur goes through. And we created a credit business, which would lend to businesses which typically would really struggle to get credit from a bank, either because the bank would take too long or because the needs were too bespoke and it didn't fit into a nice box. And therefore, where there was ever a requirement to kind of apply your mind beyond what a credit scorecard would necessarily say, the banks would just say no, in essence, especially to a business which wouldn't warrant the attention of a senior decision maker within the bank, a businessman walking into a branch for their credit requirements. And then the branch manager would have to deal within a certain framework. And that really has been at the heart of our credit activities, or our banking activities for so long. So we're not a consumer bank.
Yes.
We don't target consumers, we target businesses. And we've always felt that from a sustainability perspective, and from a South African economy perspective, you want credit to be going into businesses more than credit going into consumers. Now, there obviously is a need for consumer credit, but the economy really starts to move when businesses employ, and businesses, in order to employ, they kind of want to be growing. In order to grow, they often don't have the resources to grow, therefore they need credit. And for as long as I can remember, Sasfin's strategic differentiator was to say, we will provide credit to a business which we can manage the credit risk. It is important. Often businesses will complain that they can't access credit, but if you look at the business model, you can't give that business credit.
Yes.
But if you apply your mind to the individual behind the business, to the business model, to the security of the business, even though on paper it might look like it's a difficult credit decision to make, you can actually make a good credit decision.
Yes.
We now, over the last couple of years, have evolved our model to include more digital capabilities and to try and scale this up in a way which is less about access to a decision maker and more about kind of an ecosystem which supports the SME. And that's been a really interesting journey, which makes us far more attractive to kind of a wide range of SMEs. But still at the heart is, as these SMEs grow and as their needs evolve and there's a unique requirement, there's access to a decision maker, access to a senior person who's involved in that credit process.
Yes. And that makes perfect sense to me. So, I mean, in a sense, you guys, you kind of, in my mind, fit into this weird category of business, like the small, big category, right? Because certainly when it comes to the banking fraternity, you aren't necessarily at the scale of the FNBs and so forth. And like you just mentioned, you are aimed at a different market anyway, being business. So what is it like being in that landscape where you're not a small business by any means, but relatively you're the small, big guys? What are you doing differently, even those guys that are competing for your space? I assume that being a little bit smaller has its advantages and disadvantages. Could you just share a little bit about that with me?
Yeah, so it's, look, to be a bank, regardless of the size you are, as a fully fledged bank, you've got all the regulations to deal with. So there's a big cost in being a bank. And there's a big fixed overhead, in terms of infrastructure, regulation, risk management, governance, which any bank has to have. And that, as a smaller bank, is a challenge because you've got to absorb these big costs despite your lower scale than the big competitors. But I think where the big banks typically play very well is they play very well in something which is completely retail, so it's completely massified, and therefore you can sink deep infrastructure into a retail market and you basically adopt a cookie cutter approach, or where the deals are big enough to warrant attention from the senior investment bankers, the senior bankers at the bank. Where I think the big banks typically will struggle and often don't even want to play is in kind of the medium segment or the growing business segment, where the needs are bespoke enough that you can't just put a model forward, some kind of system to address those issues, but they're not big enough to warrant that attention. And I think that's really always been our opportunity where we've played as a bank in that segment. I think that's such an important segment for the economy.
Absolutely.
So it's not your micro businesses necessarily, even though if micro businesses see themselves growing into a bigger business, I think we're really well placed because we've built the digital capabilities for a micro business. But as they evolve and their needs evolve, I think we can address that. And it's not the super huge businesses either, it's that middle segment.
Yes. So, you and I don't know each other very well, but the way I would describe myself to you, and there's a reason why I'm mentioning this, is that I'm a small business hippie. And in that sense, what really matters to me is I've seen I can really change a lot about the world by where I spend my money and where I put my vote. And I have made a decision that I can use my social channels for good. That's how it started with the Small Business Showcase. But I can also shine spotlights on people who are doing great things. So the story I want to tell you is that I didn't have much frame of reference around Sasfin, with the exception of your rand dollar thing that was there. I always drive past that every day. More importantly, I really started to get to know the bank Sasfin through your people. And the thing that clicked over for me in wanting to actually do real business with Sasfin were your people. I think that what you've managed to do is somehow get really great people to be there with you. So I want to dive into that, because whenever that happens, more often than not, that's by design, it's not by accident. There's an intention there. Do you want to run me through that? What is this process? How are you grabbing the best people?
Yeah, so it's obviously people is everything. We're a service business, and people are very important. And I think that typically when I interview a candidate, a senior candidate for a role, but even not a senior candidate, and you ask them the question, what attracts you to Sasfin? The general response is that I can make a difference. So if you want to go and work in a big bank, your ability to move the dial is quite difficult. This is a huge business with massive infrastructure, and your ability to shift those complex organizations becomes very difficult. So often we find that people join us because they want to make a difference. And they see our platform as an opportunity to make a difference. And that really talks to an entrepreneurial spirit. It talks to a person who wants to build something. Now, it's hard to be an entrepreneur in the genuine sense, start your own business if you want to be in banking, because the cost and infrastructure and the And the platform's so difficult. But to kind of have that going beyond spirit that an entrepreneur has is something which we really look to inculcate. And even take the support of the Small Business Showcase, which we're so excited to be part of. And I think giving a platform to small businesses, as you're doing, is something which is such an important element which our research shows that small businesses need, is they want platforms or opportunities to grow. That was a decision that our marketing team made. Didn't have to come through an exco for an approval. People are empowered to make those decisions, and we back people with those decisions.
Yeah, because I come from a marketing background, and I've been saying for the longest time that people are tired of hearing what companies have to say. Advertising and marketing has become that. Like, they'll use these big billboards to spew out garbage, really. That's the way I see it. And we have these finely tuned bullshit meters. Just as consumers, we have them because we are bombarded every second of every day with marketing messages. So we've learned to decode them, even if it's happening subconsciously. So the big thing that I'm always saying to companies is stop saying, start doing. That's why I think the Small Business Showcase is so epic. And what made part of the deal so great was that we collectively as two entities agreed that there's actually playing the long game on this. Right? We're not going to do it for like a month or two, then leave it, because that's what's required to help these guys along. And I think in that, it's why I wanted so badly to have you here, is just to showcase to people, not put on this facade of, the beautiful so-called message. It's like, no, just to say, we're not just saying we're doing. I think the Small Business Showcase, certainly from your guys' end, and even before us, you guys were doing this. And I think it should be applauded. So I don't mean to put you on the spot. I guess my question is, do you love what you do?
Mostly, right? Most of the time I love what I do. When we reflect on a business that we gave credit to and that business has grown into an amazing business, and that we often have those discussions, often banks are good at post-morteming, right? What went wrong with that client? How did we lose money on that client? I often think to myself, we should post-mortem the deals we didn't do where clients became great clients. But reflecting on the businesses where we've been part of that journey. There's a great business in Cape Town that we supported out the blocks early on, and now we kind of advancing 80 million rand of credit to them, which we came to our credit committee recently for an additional increase. We started with them where we gave them a 3 million rand line. Those kind of stories, or that's most exciting. And kind of being part of a team, there's struggles. We are a small bank, so sometimes we're undercapacitated for the things that we want to do, and now we're dealing with different issues, and that's what it is to be an entrepreneur. And so those struggles can be taxing, but at the same time, when those pieces of work come to fruition, you build a great digital platform which can make a big difference to how small business operates, and you see how those journeys come together. So I think that, am I kind of walking into the office every minute of every day and I'm thinking, okay, I'm so happy to be here? Not exactly, but when I'm happy to put the work in, and most of the time, you feel those great kind of, this passion for the work that we do, and then to see that come together, those moments are really fulfilling. And I think that's with everything in life, the most rewarding things take a lot of work.
Absolutely. I don't know if people know or not that we don't ever script these interviews. Like, you didn't walk in knowing what I'm going to ask. I'm glad you answered exactly that, because I think there is officially a time for saying it how it is and just being raw, not using authenticity as a strategy, but just telling it how it is. I'm glad you answered that. So I want to close off with two final points. The first one is being in the space that you're in, and with the knowledge that you have and the experience that you've had over the last not only 18 months with COVID, but before, what piece of advice would you be giving to small businesses right now? I know that's a very broad question, but if there's one or two key points that you can think of that you would love to share with an audience on the other side, small businesses who are struggling right now through no fault of their own, what would you be saying to them? I'm glad I just got you.
You got me. I have to think a bit about that. Look, I think perseverance is very important.
Yes.
And I think that COVID can knock people, right? And it's knocked many people. But I think, we often see this with a business. We tire on a business. We keep hearing from the business owner, our business is about to turn.
Yes.
It's about to turn. We're about to and sometimes you think that the guy's just, he's wanting it so badly, but it's not going to really happen. But typically businesses that persevere and kind of just keep going at it, I think that's obviously very important.
Yes.
And we can always kind of say the reason my business isn't succeeding is because the bank didn't give me credit, or because I didn't get the right people, or because I didn't have enough of a head start in life, etc. That kind of victim mentality. But the businesses that make it, they find a way. They find a way to kind of overcome it. And, if the bank says no for credit, they find another way. They keep coming back. They shift the model slightly, as opposed to saying that the reason my business isn't succeeding is because of pointing out. They kind of look themselves in the mirror and say, to be an entrepreneur is tough. I don't have these resources, but I'm going to find a way. I'm going to be entrepreneurial, and I'm going to persevere. And I think that, especially now that we've been through 12 rounds of COVID, I think that, the book Good to Great talks about the flywheel effect, and how great businesses, you have to imagine this huge flywheel. You're pushing and pushing at the flywheel, and eventually you say, I've had enough. But, if that flywheel just moves an inch and then another inch, then that momentum is power.
Yeah, Jim Collins, Good to Go, a good book. I want to kind of close off by giving you an opportunity with the audience over there. That is your close-up there. And I would love for you to just leave a parting message, maybe call to action, whatever it is. Like, is there something that you want people to know about Sasfin, or something we didn't cover, or just any message around your business that you would love people to know? That's your close-up.
Yeah. So, what we've done recently is we've partnered with the European Central Bank through the Dutch development bank called the FMO to be able to offer small business loans to small businesses. And they've kind of given us some support in this regard, which enables us to give credit to businesses which ordinarily we weren't ready, let's say. They weren't yet ready for credit. And we've got a $50 million capacity for this. And we've built some credit capabilities around that. And we've been building loans into a new segment of the market. So whereas typically and historically, our lending has been focused on, say, slightly larger businesses, we're now focusing on a more entry-level business. And that's all rolled up into our digital banking capability. So we're very passionate about small businesses. And what we've really been working in the last 2 or 3 years is to build a capability which is more attractive and appealing and appropriately designed for a smaller business. And we look forward to working with you.
So, Michael, I really want to just thank you on 2 notes. Really, I think the first is obviously the most appropriate, because we're a small business and we got the crap kicked out of us initially. We rebuilt. It's been a phenomenal journey. I don't wish that pain upon anybody, but it's definitely been the best experience of my life. It's easier to say that now than a year ago. And so when an entity like a Sasfin comes along and they spot something, which is how this came about. Hey, we really like the small business showcase of yours. And how do we help you? And how do we get involved? And I think it sets such a good example to the market that small and bigger guys can really work so well together, but you have to have the appetite for it. And I want to say thank you to you guys for having the appetite for it. And I'm really excited about what we've done in a short space, but I think that with the way we've structured everything to really have a long-term impact on these guys is powerful. And then I really just want to say thank you for being a fun CEO who didn't put me under ridiculous pressure to feed you with 1 million pre-verburated questions. You allowed me to spar with you a little, and you had no clue what I was going to do, to be fair. And you kind of just ran with it. And I love that. I really do buy into the people. So from a suits and sneakers perspective to you, really, we really want to just say thank you. And I mean that from the heart space. Anybody who knows me knows that I won't say anything I don't think in the first place. So,
no, it's a pleasure. And thank you for having me on the show. And thank you for partnering with us. And thank you mostly for what you're doing for small businesses, because really nothing could be more important. I was actually thinking about we're having a Transform Our Society strategy engagement next week with our team. And I've been putting together the agenda and the program for it. And people talk about the environment and governance, etc. But I don't think there could be anything more important to South Africa right now than to get the economy going. And the only way to really do it in a meaningful way is to get businesses going. That will raise employment. It will, and nothing could be more important. And that's what you're doing. that's what we're trying to do. So it's great that we are in this together. And thanks for having me.
Pleasure. And so the last point I would leave is I think we definitely are due over time for around 2, 3, and 4 where we can get into some nitty-gritty. But until then, thank you so much for coming.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.